Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to part 2 of a PvP Daily. Day on Daily number 353. And we're looking at this game where the players are doing something a little bit unusual in these openings, but everything has seemed pretty reasonable so far. But what I want to do is back up to around 7 minutes. And I want to talk about, from each player's point of view, what some next steps seem like. So, if I'm this blue Protoss player, I've spotted this proxy pylon, I'm not too concerned there, I'm going to remove this production tab. What is my opponent up to? I haven't seen him 4-gate. I have not seen him 4-gate. I don't see an early expand. Based upon the fact that we have 3 gateways here, there's a couple of things that make sense. Blink Stalkers, him coming in with a crazy Blink Stalker aggression. Dark Templar are one that he's just sort of like hiding in his base, trying to do some sort of DT play. I suppose something like some hidden Void Rays or some hidden Phoenixes. I'll actually still include that. Not for warp gating, let's see. And then maybe some sort of hidden Robo-ish thing, right? So I want to do the Blink Stalkers, Dark Templar, some sort of crazy air thing, some sort of crazy Robo Colossus thing. Now, when you go for a really early expand, you generally cannot get that much information out of your opponent. Because there's 2 ways to get information. One is to walk into his base and see what he's doing. The second one is to put pressure on his front and see what is there. So we've been able to do a little bit of that. And that's why I like this little Stalker play, the fact that he's able to get some counts here, but still has not really seen that many units. So honestly, does not really know. So in my eyes, the fact that we're going for 4-gate and a Robo, I think is the smartest thing that we could do. It's kind of transparent. Our opponent will almost certainly expect us to be doing something within this box. But that absolutely does not make it bad. Why? Because we just saw that there was no expansion. We already have a huge lead. It doesn't matter. We could honestly give him vision right now. We want to be playing in a stable way so that we don't really lose too much. Now, our next Sickness player is in somewhat of an uncomfortable situation. One of the reasons I was a little bit like, a little hesitant about his play is that, sure, we have managed to defend this early attack, and sure, we're starting to get our Immortals up, but we just don't know anything. Is he going 4-gate? We didn't really see that many units. Is he expanding? He could really be doing anything. So, in my eyes, I don't want to say, oh, next Sickness just played bad, that's not really good, to do this sort of play. What I would say is, with his lack of knowledge of exactly what he's doing, then he just needs to have a really, really, really good timing attack. Because most timing attacks are just good, because not because of exactly what you see him doing, but just because the race is not really capable of dealing with an attack at that time. So here comes next Sickness. I really strongly think he should push with 2 Immortals and a bunch of units as quickly as he can. Because that's a good mix of fast and really scary. We have some sense that he has some Stalkers out. So this could be early expand. This probably could be a blink play. It's a number of things, but I think that this is smart to begin moving out as quickly as he can. A lot of times I would wait until I had my second Immortal done. However, because we just saw a lot of Stalkers, but not that many, this probably means that he is indeed going to be a little bit weak to our composition in the moment. So I think this is kind of a remarkable judgment call by next Sickness. Pretty good. And I wanted to come back briefly and note this sort of wubulous world of imaginary possibilities, right? Sure, we have our 4 gates up, and we're going Robo, because this is mainly our answer to, hey, if he's making Blink Stalkers on 3 gates, well, no problem, we're going to have 4 gates worth of units. And we're even going to have our Robo facility if he's going Observer. And you might ask something like, well, hey, what if he's going for Fast Air, or if he's going for some Colossus, or any of that other crazy business? You're noticing that this still accounts for that, right? This still accounts for that. You know how I always say the most important thing is macro, and sometimes the best counter is just to have a lot of stuff? Well, here is a specific circumstance where I can say, well, what if he's going for some hidden Void Rays? It's okay, because we're going to be macroing well off 4 gateways, and we're just going to have enough Stalkers. If we were trying to do some sort of 2-gate Stalker with Robo, we could be macroing well, and we wouldn't be able to hold it off. There's no trick to be able to defend it. It's not like, haha, I have observers, I can defend DTs. Against something like Void Rays, you just need to have a lot of stuff. Very kind of similar to the dealing with the Blink Stalker play. So we see our Protoss player, he's saving up all his Chrono Boost, or he's just messing up. It's one of the two, and I'm actually not quite sure which one it is. But I would imagine that it is the saving up one, because the instant we begin to see some pressure, oh, we can just Chrono Boost all our gateways and get out a gigantic force very, very rapidly. And look at this, even able to build an emergency backup Immortal. This is a very, very smartly thought out expand play, and I like it a lot. And the general theme I'm seeing of a lot of PvP is trying to keep as active a robotics facility as we can in a lot of circumstances. The active robotics facility allows us to be really, really aggressive. We actually see Next Sickness spending almost all his Chrono Boost on those Immortals. So this is a kind of moment in the game where I was excited because I was like, wow, we're actually seeing this matchup develop into some other crazy stuff. Probes are kind of getting cut here and there, but you'll note that our blue player is just getting so much stuff that he's in just fine shape. But Next Sickness does something that really excites me. He's going to begin being really aggressive and use a lot of sentries. A crazy ton of sentries. Yeah, to be able to put on this kind of pressure. Really cool. Really, really cool. I would have liked to see a little bit more damage dealt. But one thing that I don't think has really been experimented around with a lot is kind of a low Stalker count. And a big amount of Sentry, Zealot, Immortal. To be able to do like pressure like this in these circumstances, like Sentry, Immortal, surprisingly is a very affordable unit composition. You actually can get away with making a lot of units in that way. Stalkers are obviously really good with force fields though, so I'm a little bit torn. Now, if I'm in Next Sickness's position, I'm probably feeling pretty gross because my opponent has another expansion up. I'm sending Immortals out as quickly as I can. There's a third one. I'm getting my base up, but I really kind of have to begin doing some more pressure. I need to have some advantage that I can begin going for. If I were in Blue's position, I would probably be thinking of adding on an additional gateway here at some point. I don't really want to go Colossus right now. That's a little bit difficult to actually afford the time to do that. Everything else I think I can actually get away with. The resources I can probably afford it, but it just takes so damn long and eats into everything else. Yuckity, yuckity, yuck. And this is one thing I'm not quite so sure how much I like, but it's a Warp Prism. Ah, Next Sickness, kind of having some ideas here. Having himself some ideas. And this is the moment that I really think Next Sickness should have been pushing aggressively. This is like, I think, a very clear attack. I mean, hell, if we even go to the army size tab, they're totally equal in size, except our Protoss player Next Sickness has the, he actually has, like, mostly, or Next Sickness has a lot of force field, and this is mostly Zealots. We can get a pretty good slice on it. But this is I think a clever tactic that's going to be used more and more, which is a proxy pylon, kind of, but more like a pylon over here. A kind of distance proxy pylon, whose purpose is not speed of attack, but is instead focused on the ability to counterattack. It's like a counterattack pylon, I guess is what I'd call it. And I really think that this is going to increasingly become a big deal in Protoss vs. Protoss, is having these counterattack pylons in varying locations. We had the obvious counterattack pylon here as Next Sickness. I bet there will be future ones down here, or maybe even one all the way in this main to be able to warp a few Zealots in there. Because what we've seen is this pullback, this engagement by Next Sickness, I think absolutely should have happened, but he was pulling back to deal with these two Zealots, and then he lost control of his high ground, lost that pylon there. And now here comes another pylon that he just might lose, but manages to save himself. So Twilight Council, emphasizing his gateway unit reinforcement. I like that a lot. Again, the active robotics facility and the Warp Prism by Next Sickness. And I want to note a couple things about the way late game should play out in this circumstance, because we actually do have options. I think that I prefer a gateway heavy focus. I prefer that. I prefer my Speed Zealots and my Blink Stalkers especially. But more and more and more, the Archon is totally awesome. I think that getting this sort of mix, getting Blink first, and then very rapidly getting a lot of Zealots with leg speed and Archons is going to be like a great way to transition. Because these two Immortals, I think that this Protoss player does not really want to make them. In this circumstance, he's like, yeah, well, I kind of have to. He's really putting pressure on me. But he would love to be able to get away with not building them. But still non-stop probe production. And a nice little engagement. I really like this. Blue threw down these 3 force fields at the back. Here it comes. Let's see it. Come on. Come on, sweetie. Come on. Go ahead. Go down the ramp. Go ahead. All right. Throws down these force fields to catch these 3 stalkers off guard. At which point, next Sickness throws down these force fields to catch the rest of the units off guard. And this unit mix, to me, is exciting as hell. This is a unit mix that I think I deserves a lot of consideration just to think about. Because it's not just he's getting Immortals and Sentries and Stalkers and there you go. It has more depth to that. And in a general sense, you know kind of how someone would say something like Ling Baneling Mutalisk works really well together. You harass with the Mutalisks and you can pick off tanks and medevacs. Then you use your Zerglings to scoop around the Marine group and hit it with the Banelings. You make this mixture, but because you kind of know the purpose of each individual unit, you know how you need to be positioning your army, you know what you need to replenish. You might say something like, well, I have plenty of gas to make Mutalisks, but clearly I need Zerglings right now because their purpose is blah. It's these two things in particular, the Sentries and the Immortals, that really get me excited. The Immortals, early. These are going to be good for early defense. Notice how what I just did is I looked at the composition we have now, and I'm thinking about before. How do we get here, and why is it good? Well, we obviously can use our Sentries early on to help defend us from 4 gates. We saw Next Sickness do that. We get these Immortals up as these huge, heavy-ass power units with a lot of range. They have tons of range now, 6. It doesn't actually sound like much of an increase, 5 to 6, but it really feels stupidly good. And we have these Stalkers out here that kind of are not very high in number. They're just sort of here to do a little teensy bit of extra damage. And in my eyes, the purpose of these Stalkers is kind of to prevent him from being overly aggressive and engaging us. Like, for instance, let's say I just had these units, Sentries and Stalkers, and I were out here in the middle of nowhere. He would easily be able to bum rush me. But being able to pinch off things with this unit mix, I think, is a very good way to be aggressive. Even if you have fewer units than your opponent, if you just increase your Sentry and Immortal count and cut Stalkers, you can continue to be aggressive. In Protoss vs. Zerg, Blink Stalker and Sentry is a good way to be aggressive. In this matchup, I think Sentry Immortal is going to increasingly become a nice way to be aggressive. Not really many Zealots because it makes it difficult for our force fields to have clear purposes. Like, for instance, here, this is an odd way to attack somebody. This is a very odd timing, but this is definitely going to be really, really good because all these units are caught off guard and we can pick off these ones on the inside. I think needed to reposition his units a little bit more. He ended up having some of the wrong units at the front there. But this is just a totally badass unit mixture. And I do not mind at all the replenishing of the Zealots by our Blue Protoss. He just wants to be more of a, I'm trying to attack you to actually kill you. This is like, I'm trying to attack you to slice little bits off. And actually, I kind of think, backing up, upon further reflection, in this battle, right, oh, backing up again, might have to hit B again, yeah, there we go. I honestly kind of feel like cutting right here may have been a little bold. Maybe cutting and then slicing right here would have been a little better. You want to try to peel off small chunks and spend a lot more energy than seems kind of reasonable. I think the Sentry count might actually increase kind of significantly in this matchup, given how strong the Immortals are panning out to be. And obviously, especially if you're up against an early expander. If you're up against a blinking player, you know, emphasize more Stalkers and Immortals and all that goody good jazz. So now Next Sickness does have his extra base up. We see this Twilight Council up, and I think that this Warp Prism should have been a teensy bit more active early on. I don't know how much exactly I like this, but what I want to do before we end up taking another break and then looking at the end of the game, I want to just look at the Warp Prism tactics that you can actually do. I want to just spend some time and stare at this Warp Prism. Apparently it looks like he wants us to stare too. Yeah, there we go. Warping in just a few units. It's kind of turned into a little bit of a stale situation. We have these Immortals here. He's kind of contained us. Not exactly by positioning, but kind of like by vision. He can see very high. I mean, we're getting some another gateway ourselves. But let's watch this little cutie pie swing on in here. Next Sickness. I think this sort of tactic can be cute. Excuse me. Trying to do these kind of mini drops like this. I think maybe that force field there was unneeded, and it looks like he hasn't really been able to unleash a lot of pain there. But at the very least, it's going to do this. Chrono Boost is going to motivate him to leave some guys back. It can help peel us out of our contain, and I actually don't mind this. And upon reflection, strategically, we're seeing Next Sickness get 2 robotics facilities. He's really loving getting this ridiculous Immortal count up, and we're actually going to see him get some Colossi up. But of course, what's the problem you always encounter with Colossus and Immortals? Well, they kind of need to be crammed together. You can't really like spread out and have a few Immortals go that way and a few Colossi go this way and do all that counterattacking. So I think that this might be a very useful way for robotics-heavy players in this matchup to be able to put just a little bit of pressure on. Maybe even getting that Warp Prism speed upgrade. Even bring some of those observers on in. Some of the Immortals on in. He did do the thing where you warp or you force field the ramp. I don't think that's as great because if you force field the ramp, what are you going to do? Be able to morph in 3 units suddenly? This seemed a little bit not as potent as I would have liked. But at the very least, it still does some harassment. Not overcommitting to it. And look, it's actually starting to do some guaranteed damage. It's actually picking off a couple of probers. Doing some good stuff. And it looks like, yeah, this is the sort of mix I want. De-emphasizing the Immortals, emphasizing our gateway units, getting Zealot Leg, getting the Forge. I would have gotten the Forge a lot earlier instead of getting all these Immortals. Like, too many Immortals can actually be a little bit of a curse in this unit composition. Because he's going to have a ton of units that you want to maneuver around, like the Colossi, like the Immortals. You want to be hitting that with the Zealots, etc., etc. And yeah, I guess we'll just talk for a few more minutes about this little counterattacking Warp Prism, about this good jazz, and how this vision situation is not exactly what you ever want to be in. But no, you know what? This is actually a good time to take a break. We're actually going to pop back here to around the 12-minute mark. Actually, we're going to speed ahead to around the 13-minute mark in the break. And when we do that, we are going to finally take a look at kind of how these players are finishing up. They're both going to go down wildly different paths, and we'll talk about this sort of ending to the PvP. So with that, I'll be right back. I'm actually going to get some water, and I think for once we might actually have a delicious daily that is under an hour. I've been going way too long lately. So, alright, cool. It's going to be a nice, clean, simple, straight-up delicious daily. Yeah.